And welcome back to Spotlight. How would you make Michigan a top 10 education state?
Well, I think one of the things that's most important is that you surround yourself with people who understand this process. And one of the skills that I bring to the table is an ability to recruit people who understand those things. One of the big things that I've learned about talking to Michigan families and educators is that we need to rebuild our counselor system within the school system. You know, we put so many pressures on kids now. You know, we have a suicide crisis, we have a drug crisis. Some of those things, I think, when I went through public schools in Michigan in the 70s, we had 3 times as many counselors per student as we do now. It's one of those things that we've decided is unimportant for some reason. And a lot of the teachers that I talked to said it would be really wonderful if we went back to where we had counselors that could guide children through and recognize when we had issues. So if they're having problems at home. And I relate a lot of different things to that, including not just academic performance, but school shootings and other things where children kind of just get pushed through the system now. And so one of the places that I would redirect some of our priorities would be towards that.
Do you think we should pay our teachers more than what they're currently making, or are they making enough?
Well, teachers are paid pretty well in Michigan compared to other states, so I don't think that's really at the heart of the problem. You know, one of the things that parents and others are going to find frustrating over the next 30 years is I think we're going to change our modalities and how kids are educated.
How so?
Well, our system of, you know, sort of brick and mortar schools is, you know, built for the 19th century. You know, we were training kids to work in factories. And the world is changing, and so kids are going to learn a lot of different ways online. There may be different types of environments, but just the traditional go to school and you'll have a single teacher, then you're going to move from class to class kind of way of learning, I think is going to change a lot.
Do you support the governor's Marshall Plan for education and skilled trades?
I don't. Although I think those things should happen, the idea that the government has to be the vector by which those things get done, I think is just wrong-headed.
He says it's the catalyst to jumpstart getting more skilled trades people into the pipeline so that the next time an Amazon comes knocking, they say, okay, Michigan has it together.
That's presuming that the next time Amazon comes knocking that we would want them. I said just say no to the auction, that somehow or another we have to do another big tax giveaway to attract corporate business again. What libertarians believe, and certainly what I would propose, is working with the legislature to lower the tax burden, to lower the cost of water, to lower the cost of utilities, to make it more attractive for businesses and homeowners to be in Michigan. You know, small business is really the driver of jobs, not businesses like Amazon. You know, they come along and they create this one, even if they came here and people would look at that and say, well, isn't that wonderful? The fact is that if you took all the Fortune 500 companies together, they're a drop in the bucket of what employment is in America. So what we need to do is encourage an environment where small business people are willing to take chances, and frankly, we build it for ourselves. You know, the reason I built a small business is because I love Michigan and I want to be here. And so I'm building a business that my children might one day work in. And that's what most people do.
Do you think there are things government can and should do to make our schools and our workplaces safer?
Well, that's a pretty complicated question, and I don't know that I'm an expert in every area. But certainly, one of the things that we don't need to do is arm our teachers. You know, that's been one of the...
You're dead set against that.
I'm dead set against that.
Why?
Well, I believe in the right of gun ownership, absolutely. I believe in open carry. I believe that creating gun-free zones was a mistake.
But you don't think teachers being armed would be a deterrence?
No, and teachers don't want that, and that's what's even more important. Is I do think that, you know, some of the things that can be done really involve the way in which we put our schools together. And again, the bigger thing is identifying risk, and professionals don't believe that that's the right answer either. You know, even though, you know, someone who I don't mention his name very often, but because he's president, he gets a lot of media. You know,
I wonder who that is.
Yeah, he talks about arming teachers, and it's just wrong-headed.
All right, we need to sneak another little break in here. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about maybe auto insurance reform and part-time legislature. We'll be right back. very quickly, you ran for Congress before unsuccessfully. Some would say if you couldn't win that race, which was for just one district, why should people elect you across this state to represent the entire state?
Well, recognize that, you know, we have these two parties that do everything possible to make it hard for a third party to push themselves into the conversation. I ran in that race, as I've run every 2 years, to help the Libertarian Party represent their values. And so this is really the culmination of 20 years worth of work. I'd like people to evaluate the ideas more than the person. I stand on the shoulders of people that have been working in the Libertarian Party since 1971. And so I do that proudly, and I think if people came to my website, cometogethermichigan.org, they would be able to evaluate those ideas. And what's unfortunate is, you know, people just believing that we have a two-party system. What we have are two large parties that make it difficult for anyone else to be in that conversation. And so when I advocate for a better democracy, it isn't just for libertarians. I think I advocate for the Green Party and for other voices to come in.
People are talking about auto insurance rates, say they are way too high. Do you agree that they're too high in this state? And how would you change it?
Well, some of that comes from redlining. We have auto insurance companies that take certain zip codes and I believe that they inappropriately charge
how do you
more.
fix the problem?
Well, I think it has to do with daylight. It has to do with having the insurance commissioner do a better review of how these rates are established. The other thing is costs. You know, that's the one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot. But when someone has an injury, like they damage their knee in an auto accident, they pay a lot more than if that same thing happened outside of a car accident. And so just like other parts of our medical needs, I think we have to look at the cost factor.
So that means you're going to have to tangle with probably the trial lawyers and the hospitals. Are you ready to do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Part-time legislature, for or against?
I could go for that. I think the bigger problem that we have in the legislature is we've allowed the committee chairman to have way too much power. And so good ideas don't come forward, even though there might be a majority of people for it. But because the committees and the parties, the leaders in the parties control what does.
Wipe out the chairman?
No, I think what I would like to see is move to a model more like what they have in New Hampshire, where there's a lot more people representing. The lobbyists know exactly who to talk to right now, because the legislature is relatively small and there's a small number of people that hold the key to what gets done. And so I think we need to have a system that allows for a lot more input. And you know, we could go to talk about proportional representation, all sorts of other things, but the things we can do now, I think, would involve getting more people involved in the process.
On your website, you have death with dignity. Some say assisted suicide, whichever term you're more comfortable with. Hasn't Michigan already decided that?
No. No, I think we had an unfortunate...
That Kevorkian went to jail as a result.
Well, and again, I think it's time for a mature population to have that conversation. Libertarians believe in the right to decide for yourself what you're going to do. And what's really unfortunate is that it really is appropriate for individuals to make that decision rather than a group to say, oh no, we don't want you to go that way. And people languish in terrible situations for long periods of time. And again, it comes back to individuals making that decision ahead of time.
Your father worked in the old Michigan Central train depot station for a long period of time, so you've had some exposure to that building. How excited are you that Ford has purchased that?
Really happy about it. My sister and I, we think about the time we spent with our parents down there. My mother worked there too for a little while.
Your mother was a Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah. And you know, it's nice to see some of those historic things find new uses. You know, certainly, you know, my love for the city of Detroit and Wayne County, where I was born and grew up and went to school, anything that helps that resurgence is a good thing. But I think we have to do it the right way. And attract businesses because it's the better place to be and that we have good workers. I just don't think it's the role of government to figure all that out for them.
Because of this historic first Michigan Libertarian primary in the gubernatorial race, whichever one of you win and come out to be the victor on primary election day, do you think that earns you the right to be in a debate come time for the general with the Democrats and Republicans?
I do. I find it somewhat amusing. You may recall in the presidential race in 2016, there were 17 Republicans, and they put them all up there and they ask them a question and they essentially agree across the board. I think it's time that we have more than two in a debate. I think it's appropriate to have all the parties that are qualified, that are nominating a governor, to have the opportunity to get up. And we might actually get some differences of opinion, and that would allow the Michigan citizens to make a decision based on the quality of their ideas and not the party that they belong to.
What's a good book that you've read recently that perhaps says a lot about you and your candidacy, or just that you feel people ought to read?
Well, I didn't read it recently, but I read it sometime back, and I really recommend it. And Harry Brown, who was a former presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, wrote a book called Why Government Doesn't Work. And I think it's a very useful book for people to read. It tells a lot about how the marketplace is a better way for people to get the things that they want. And as someone who has now spent the better part of 30 years of my life working in the Libertarian Party, that's one of the ones I would have folks read.
All right. Bill Gelineau,
thank you.
Thank you so much
Appreciate
for coming in. Good luck on the campaign trail, and may the best man or woman win.
Thanks, Chuck.
And we want to thank you at home for joining us. I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more Newsmakers in the Spotlight. We hope you have a great week.